What are some of the downstream effects? We mentioned a couple of them. What are some of the downstream effects of not getting enough sleep and good quality sleep?
Well, I think the one that's on the forefront of a lot of people's mind is, at least the people that I talk to, my clients, is weight loss. Obviously, weight loss
Always boils down to that.
Always boils down to weight loss. I mean, either weight loss or building muscle.
It always is.
They're kind of one and the same in terms of sleeping. But as far as weight loss goes, if you are not sleeping well, if you're not getting enough restorative sleep, then cortisol comes into play. You have this chronically elevated cortisol. When your cortisol or stress hormone is chronically elevated, your body is going to basically go into an emergency mode, where emergency mode is not conducive for weight loss. Emergency mode is conducive for holding on to fat.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is like the fight or flight, right?
Yep,
and
exactly.
the being chased by a tiger, versus just being stressed out by your boss. Your body doesn't know. Cortisol kicks up, right? We've talked about cortisol as the hormone here. It's the one that we're chasing while we're working out. It's a good thing. It helps partition or tells basically, the partitioning of different macronutrients at different times of the day. It is a good thing.
Yes.
It's just chronically hitting that button over and over and over and over again without getting the recovery that we need is when it becomes a problem. And I love that you brought that up because when we're looking at sort of cortisol cycles, the cortisol should be dropping at the end of the day, right? There's going to be a spike at the beginning of the day. Well, at least that's what it should be. As your body's getting up and getting ready to go for the day, it starts to turn on this, okay, we're going to hit the afterburner button. That is cortisol a little bit to get things going. It starts hormonal process to just get your body moving, rocking and rolling for the day. As the day goes on, maybe you go through a workout at some point midday or later in the day, you might get a little spike, but ultimately it should go back down as you're heading into bedtime. What are some of the things that are impacting this in a negative way that is keeping cortisol up? We talked about just stress in general. That could be environmental stress, emotional stress, things you may be putting in your system from like anything you may be consuming in your diet. Maybe we talk about some of the effects of some of those things and how to mitigate that. One that comes to mind for me right away is alcohol, and how that can wreak havoc on getting into sleep. Like and to start this off, and then I want to hear kind of what you have to say about this, Stephen, is alcohol is a sedative, right? So it's going to relax you and help you maybe basically fall asleep. And now we get into the quality piece. Can you talk a little bit about how it impacts the quality of sleep?
Yeah. I think that's a very common myth, especially if someone is trying to no longer drink. Like, oh, I can't sleep now, or my glass of wine, at the end of the day or after dinner, it helps me fall asleep, or it helps me sleep. It might help you fall asleep because, you're sedated. You're not actually asleep. You're just temporarily sedated. What alcohol does, not to get too much into the weeds of neurotransmitters and things like that, alcohol increases GABA. So GABA is a relaxing neurotransmitter. So GABA goes up. When GABA goes up, we feel relaxed. It's easier for us to go to sleep. But when as the alcohol begins to be metabolized and leave our body, now our brain is trying to rebalance. So in comes glutamate, and glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter. So typically your brain is always trying to find balance. But alcohol has shot GABA way up. Now the brain is trying to increase glutamate and bring the GABA down. And what happens is that balance gets thrown off. Now glutamate skyrockets, and that's when you wake up in the middle of the night with anxiety, or anyone who's experienced hangxiety.
Night sweats.
The day after, the morning after a night where you were, getting after it. Basically, that glutamate level has gone up, and now you feel anxious. Alcohol might be very temporarily help you fall asleep for a few hours, but then your sleep is going to be disrupted. Alcohol also disrupts REM sleep as well. That disrupted REM sleep probably has something to do with maybe not remembering the night before quite as well, or your mood being all over the place.
Yeah, so this is like, I brought up the cortisol first to talk about the alcohol, because a lot of people are going to the alcohol to negate the stress and the effects of the cortisol, or the cortisol is a byproduct of the stress, but they're looking to balance that out. And so what you just did was paint a really clear picture of how your body kind of overcompensates, right? It's similar to like the insulin glucagon response. Like I put in all this sugar into my system, or food for that matter. I have an insulin response, insulin spikes. It's very high. Your body senses this. It's trying to bring this back down, starts to release glucagon in order to do that. But then glucagon now is overpowering the insulin, and now you're feeling this tired and, whatever feeling that you're feeling, and you're trying to find this balance throughout the day. That's the low time, low spot after lunch. That's 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or just like fighting to stay awake.
Hypoglycemic.
So, yeah, very similar type of processes. So yeah, you're not really getting into that sleep. Alcohol is detrimental. There's also a lot of study that's going on now just with regard to how if you're regularly consuming alcohol, your body will actually the brain actually rewires itself. And chemically things actually completely change, not from a dependency perspective, but how it reacts to the alcohol and ultimately how it reacts to the sleep at the end of the day. So you are effectively taking away your ability to get there by regularly doing this. And that's something to think about. And the reason I brought alcohol up first was because it always comes up. It almost always comes up. I mean, there's very few people who are like, I don't drink, that I run into in the nutrition game that are having challenges with their nutrition. Majority of the people that I work with are having, one or more drinks during the week. And the thing with alcohol is the half-life on it, like caffeine, can be very long for people once it's put into your system. I mean, it can be a few hours to 24-hour period. So, I might be having that drink in the afternoon at lunch, but it's still impacting me, at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock when I'm getting ready to go to bed at night. I just don't realize that I'm not immediately feeling these effects, but it's still there and my body's still dealing with it chemically from a metabolic perspective. That might be very different for somebody that can have a drink at 5, have a drink at 6, and their body metabolizes it very, very quickly, gets through, breaks it down in a much different way, and it isn't as impacted. So this is very individual on how that alcohol can impact your sleep. But the bottom line is we know it does. There's no doubt about that. And so if you're regularly going to bed and you're doing that with a glass of wine or 2, kind of every night or multiple nights per week, understand that will, let's go back to the downstream piece, impacting. There's a lot of correlation to not being able to lose fat, right? And not being able to recover correctly through science or through the science of what alcohol is doing to you during that sleepy period.